Well, good Wednesday morning to you. Being off on Monday kind of threw my time schedule off, and this is obviously a short week and what have you. Look, before we get into the video this morning on resurrection and kingdom, pardon me, I want to remind you that my second formal public debate with Dr. David Hester, professor at Faulkner University, is coming up June 15th and 16th. This will be held at the Eastern Meadows Church of Christ, again, June 15th and 16th. I still have not heard word from Dr. Hester as to whether or not the debate will be live streamed. I've asked numerous times about this. Still no information. I assure you that the moment that I get that information, I will be posting it on my websites, pardon me, as well as Facebook. So, but if you can't be there, hopefully it will be live streamed. If it's not live streamed, hope you can be there. This promises to be a good debate. I'm going to do my very best to give the audience a ton of information to think about. All right? Easy to understand and powerful. All right. We are looking at Paul's doctrine of resurrection and the kingdom. Flesh and blood shall not inherit the kingdom. Now, in a book that is admitted to have some eschatological elements in it, but which is seldom seen and discussed in regard to eschatology in the sense of resurrection, all right? Resurrection does not appear in the book of James. That is to say, the word resurrection, anastasis from the Greek, is not in the book of James. However, as I've called attention to before, just because a given word is not in a text does not mean the doctrine is not in the text. It is an absolutely horrid doctrine, hermeneutic. When I hear and when I read people say, and generally in the midst of controversy, well, preterists, they appeal to this text for the resurrection, but it doesn't say one single word about resurrection, even though it talks about the coming of the Lord and the judgment, even though it talks about the rewarding, even though it talks about the judgment of the living and the dead. Look, folks, let me reiterate this hermeneutic. Just because a given word, term, or phrase does not appear in a given text does not demand, does not suggest that that text is not actually discussing a given word, term, or phrase. Now, let me illustrate, if I can, for you how resurrection is in fact in the book of James. In James chapter 2, James says, "Listen to me, my beloved brethren. Has not God chosen the poor of this world to be heirs of the kingdom of God, which He promised to those who, who love Him?" Do you catch that? Has not God chosen the poor, rich in faith, to be heirs of the kingdom which He promised to those who love Him? This word heirs is incredibly rich, eschatologically significant. You see, in Romans chapter 8, Paul said that if you suffer for Christ and if you believe in Him, then you are heirs. Heirs of God, joint heirs together with Him. What were the heirs waiting on? The adoption, the redemption of the body, Romans 8:23. And in Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, when the Son of Man shall come, then shall He sit on the throne of His glory. and all the nations shall be gathered together before him. He shall say to those on his right hand, enter thou into the joys of the kingdom. Inherit the kingdom that was prepared before the foundation of the world. Inherit. Heirs, inheritance. Galatians chapter 3. For as many, those who have believed are the children of God. For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ, where there is neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free. And if you are Christ, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Well, what did Abraham look for? What was the Abrahamic promise? Well, in Hebrews chapter 11, 13 to 16, it was the heavenly country, the heavenly city. Oh, and by the way, Hebrews 11:35, it was the better resurrection. Do you begin to see the incredible significance of the word heirs? Heirs of the kingdom. Now watch this. James said, beloved brethren, has God not chosen the rich of this world, rich in faith, to be heirs of the kingdom which he has promised to those who love him? Well, this kingdom, he goes ahead, and this is remarkable. He goes ahead to saying in James chapter 3, talking about the life that is not commensurate with faith, and he says, this wisdom, and he's been talking about putting off the works of the flesh and not using the tongue in the wrong way, but he says, this wisdom does not descend from above, now watch this, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. That word sensual there is psychikos, the same identical word that Paul uses to talk about the natural man that doesn't enter into heaven, into the kingdom. So, pardon me. So here is James talking about the kingdom, the inheritance, and he says the mind that is opposed to Christ is earthly. Now we can develop that too, by the way. But he says it's sensual. It's psychikos. It is the natural man that does not enter the kingdom. And then what does the writer say in James chapter 5? Verse 6, be patient therefore, brethren, until the parousia. Well, Paul said the parousia was at the resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15. You get it? In James chapter 5, verse 9, or verse 8, the parousia of the Lord has drawn near. Pardon me. I kind of choked on some coffee this morning. And then in verse 9, he says, the judge is standing right at the door. So what do we have here? We have James talking about the judgment was near. The parousia had drawn near. And if you had the psychikos mind, you don't enter, you do not inherit the kingdom which God had prepared for those who love him. Do you see how James is actually very intensely focused on resurrection? Look, folks, unless we can divorce the inheritance of the kingdom from resurrection, but Paul linked them together in 1 Corinthians 15, unless we can divorce James's discussion of the natural mind, the natural man, psychikos, from Paul's discussion, and unless we can divorce the parousia and the judgment from the resurrection, from the kingdom, then James's absolute threefold expression of the nearness of the parousia, the nearness of the judgment, demands absolutely demands that the resurrection, entrance into the kingdom, was nigh at hand. And by the way, James is intensely Jewish. That coming judgment was coming on the Jewish persecutors of the church. That was in AD 70. Thanks so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. We've got more on the connection between judgment, kingdom, and resurrection. We will see you on the flip side.